Welcome back. This is Daytime Update. Now, August is Women's Month, and it's a month to highlight the contributions that women are making in society, but also to pay tribute to the more than 20,000 women who marched to the Union buildings on the 9th of August in 1956. And this in protest against the extension of past laws, women always there at the forefront of change. But what are the issues that women are grappling with today? We're joined now by Helen Smuts, who is the founder of Credo Growth Insights, and she's here to share tips for women about how to hone their qualities to step into leadership roles. Good to have you with us, Helen, and happy Women's Month to you.
Thank you, Tammy, and same for you and all the other women listeners out there. Absolutely.
Now, this is a conversation that we've been having for quite a while, and we know that it is a fact that there are pay disparities that exist between men and women in the workplace. Yeah. But there are also a lot of myths that are associated with these. Now, part of what you do is to separate the myth from the truth. Perhaps let's start with one of the myths that perhaps cloud our understanding.
Yeah, so I think one of the myths, for example, is that women doesn't make as strong leaders as what men does. And I think there's a lot of movement and a lot of acknowledgement that is out there these days that women really make great leaders. But I think that is a myth that needs to be really dealt with, and because it's a very deep bias that we sit with. It comes from messages from when we were younger and our parents and generations before that. And women in leadership has proven that we really do have amazing leadership skills. Like just if you think about how they've handled the COVID scenarios with women in state. So yeah, it's definitely a myth that can be busted.
And leadership is very key in the work that you do and in your area of focus. But how would you define leadership, and perhaps how do you define leadership style as well? What is the barometer that is used to say whether one is a competent leader or not?
Sure, that's a very interesting question. Like there are so many different leadership styles that we can go with, and like last time I spoke to you about different personalities and just how we are being as the authentic self. That will determine our type of leadership style that we have. And I think when we speak about women in leadership, the two words that come to mind for me is inclusive and collaborative. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can just say all women have an inclusive and collaborative style. It just means that we find it easier to create those type of leadership roles. But like you've got the directive style, you've got interactive and a very engaging and then a very laissez-faire. And whether you're male or female, you can fall into those styles. I think for us as women, it's to identify what is our authentic style to who I am as a person instead of trying to be a leader of what other people want me to be. And I think that for me defines like the female leader and the leadership style for women is finding our true self and really stepping into that power.
What we are finding as well, Helen, is that women who are perhaps more dominant, who are vocal, who are strong, are called to be bullies at times, and their forthrightness and their overt strength, as opposed to a more salient type of strength, is perhaps quite intimidating and lends itself to a lot of criticism from not only men, but women as well. Just your thoughts and comments on that.
Yeah. Sure, I can feel my whole system shivering when you speak about that, because I've been on the receiving end of that, of, yeah, you're too strong, you're too dominant, you're too aggressive. And that it actually creates a lot of stress and anxiety, because like I said earlier, in order to be like the female leadership, a step into your power, and now we lead with that, not dominance, but we lead with that passion and that kind of drive. And then we are told that we are being too strong. So it really impacts, and it almost pushes a woman or females to not go for what it is that they want to, and to make different business decisions. And that for me is hard, and it feels very unfair. And I guess what I certainly did is when I was on the receiving end of that is now you try to work harder because now the standards are higher. And by working harder, now you put extra stress on yourself, and then you have the other roles. So it really is quite a it's quite an unfortunate thing that when women are seen as bullies versus when the male acts in the same way, they might be seen as a really inspiring leader. And it doesn't happen everywhere, but it certainly is very present. And like I said earlier, I know exactly what that feels like. It's not easy to deal with that.
I'd like us also to talk about the pay disparities that exist between men and women. How vast are they?
Sure. There's quite a few statistics out there, and I'm not 100% sure around the latest statistics, but the difference is in Afrika and in the States, where for the same role, there's a massive gap between what the male earns versus what the female earns. Yet, again, the female might be held at higher standards. So it's almost like the odds are already against us. So we have to work harder in order to get a higher pay, which is then equivalent to where our male counterparts are. But I can't remember the stats exactly now, but it is incredibly big, the difference.
And what type of work do you do around assisting women to position themselves, for leadership, but also to position themselves for better paying positions? Or maybe not even better paying positions, but better pay within the positions that they're in, because you'll find that they're in the right positions, but not being adequately compensated.
Yeah. So I think the first thing that we do, especially at Credo, is we look at the roles that you have as a woman. Like, what are the different roles that you hold privately as well as professionally within the business? And then it's about you working on this role around who do you want to be as a woman or as a female in that role? And I think that's where the confidence comes from first, for you to dictate yourself what type of person you're going to be and the skills and the qualities that you want to show in that role. And we find that once women are starting to focus on that, their confidence starts increasing. As Sheryl Sandberg says from Facebook, then they start to sit at the table. Women then, when the confidence increases, then they speak up. They speak about their opinions. And all of a sudden, they are starting to be heard. And now it's like, okay, look at the contribution that you're making. And then naturally, performance reviews increase. There might be some salary adjustments that are being made. I'm talking long term now. But the first step is to work with women to find a space where you can feel that I am as valuable as the male counterpart or someone else, another female sitting next to me. And I am going to decide who and how I want to be in the different roles. And then finding action steps around how can I get to that so that we can start building on the confidence.
And how is it that women can best navigate all the facets of their lives and the various responsibilities they have? Because, leadership is not just in the boardroom, it's not just at work. There's leadership at home, there's leadership with your husband, with your family, with your children, with your friends, with your parents, your siblings. How does one navigate those roles and be authentic in all of them, but also acknowledging the dynamics and the societal dynamics that are unique to each of those different sectors?
Yeah. So I think I'm like the first thing that I would do is almost like look at all the roles and identify which roles require a lot of my time and which roles do I want to spend a lot of my time in. And are there roles that I'm holding actually for someone else instead of for me? To give you an example, I might be a coach, a netball coach somewhere, and at this moment that role is creating a lot of anxiety and stress for me. And then it's about identifying for myself, like, I need to let go of that role for now. I can bring it in at a later stage. So my first thing is clear up the roles that you have and keep the ones that you feel builds you up and that you actually have to have. And like I said earlier also, once those roles are identified, then to say, who do I want to be? How do I want to be? Who can support me in that role? For example, the family role, my husband can support me, and then bring him in as a real partner, not necessarily dictating how he needs to bath the kids or how he needs to do certain things, but bring him in as an equal partner so that he can also feel that he can support. So I think once we have those roles is to ask other women in our lives how they deal with it, because there's a lot of learning that we can get from these other women from their experience shares. So it's kind of really looking at who it is that I want to be and how I want to be.
And you know, you mentioned something quite interesting. You said, look at the roles that you have and decide which of those roles are actually for you or which of those are for other people. And granted, there are times perhaps when you will take on roles not for yourself, but in support of another. As far as timing is concerned, when is it a good time to say, okay, I've run this road for you. Yes, it was intentional. This was for you. I am in this role to support you. But now I have to withdraw from that support so I can then move on and take care of me. How does one discern those timelines in different phases?
Yeah, sure. That's a very difficult thing to answer because I think it's very different for different people. But I think if maybe the easiest way to answer this, if you wake up and you have like this dreading feeling of you now need to go and fill this role, or you're trying to find reasons as how can you get out of this role, that for me is a very good indication that you've reached the limit of that role. And it not necessarily maybe the limit, but that you might need to take a break from it. So we already have to work a lot harder to show up and to show our competence. And if we now have to work that hard to also be in a role that doesn't necessarily serve us, that takes, again, energy and time away from another role. So yeah, I would almost go with the messages that we tell ourselves when we are approaching that role. Is it one of excitement and one of building you up as a person, or is it one that's actually taking energy away from me or from you? And that's for me when the time is an indication of it's time to move on.
So it seems to me, Helen, from what you're saying, that authenticity leads to longevity. So if you're operating from your authentic self, then the chances of you being able to run the race up until the end are much higher than if perhaps it's just a role that you're fulfilling to get by. Is that what you're saying?
Tammy, I can't agree with you more. That authenticity and like it's almost like stepping into the power of you, that you then dig into that authenticity part. It's things open up for you. You see things differently. Like, for example, that me stepping into the power of that driver style and having a little bit more of a aggressive style, as people might have called it. When I've started accepting that and going, but that is what makes me me, then things really started happening for my business and for my relationships. So if we can be more authentic, people will also experience that authenticity, and it's almost like a sense of transparency that people can have with you then. So they don't have to guess because they know who you are and they know what you stand for.
Oh, wow, that is so powerful, Helen. And just before we end our conversation, our chat this afternoon, a couple of tips for women this month on how they can step into their authenticity, how can they step into their own leadership?
Yeah, so I think my favorite thing to say is get a mentor. And like I've got quite a few mentors, and I've got a mixture of mentors between women and female, male and female. And then there's two other things that I want to say that I feel quite passionate about. The first thing is we need to start giving each other feedback. So ask for feedback, but also give feedback. And when we receive feedback, is to receive it with grace and not necessarily feel that the other female that's giving us feedback is trying to attack us, but rather that we are trying to develop one another and grow one another. And then the last thing is women out here, everyone has so much experience and everyone has dealt with things in different ways. And for us to ask other women for their experience shares, like explain what it is that you've gone through or what you are struggling with, and then speak to other females and ask them, how did they deal with that? And like I just did a keynote talk before this interview, and the experience shares that came from that discussion that we've had was amazing, and so much learning to be had from each other. So instead of just thinking you have to do it on your own, there's an immense amount of females out there that has done it and that can have something to offer.
Wow, Helen Smith, you are leadership yourself. Have yourself a fabulous, empowering Women's Month. Thank you for the conversation. That's Helen Smith there. She runs Credo Growth Insights, all about leadership and stepping into your power and authenticity as a woman. I guess not only in Women's Month, may this just be a starter. It really has to be a lifestyle, a way of being, a way of thinking.